All right, welcome everyone to the reading the Neon Hemlock Speculative Showcase, part of Outright 2023. First, we would like to thank Gilead and the Mayor's Office on LGBTQ Affairs for their continued support of Outright and all our Center Arts programs. Their support allows us to continue to share our stories regardless of the artistic medium. So please join us as we thank them for their support and share a brief sponsor video.
The average baseball stadium holds about 50,000 people, enough to fill a dance floor the size of a New York City block. It was also the number of people in the US who became HIV positive every year since 2003. Then, something happened. One by one, we said, enough is enough. Instead of waiting for a cure, we took action. We got tested and retested. We talked to each other, and we talked to healthcare providers about HIV prevention options. People living with HIV started treatment right away and stuck to it, which can prevent the spread of HIV through sex. New infections went down, but we still have work to do. So let's all do our part and keep fighting, because together we can all help stop the virus. Find out what you can do at helpstopthevirus.com.
All right, thank you, and please enjoy the event.
Hey y'all, thanks to the DC Center, Outright, and Chair Emily Holland and the other volunteers for having us here with this Neon Hemlock Speculative Showcase. I'm here with 4 rad authors who I have had the pleasure and the honor of publishing in multiple forms, I realized, for this particular crew. I think I've been able to get all 3 of them into Baffling, 3 of folks, except for Caitlin, into Baffling Magazine. And I'm finally also getting Caitlin into one of my anthologies. So it's all coming together, the master plan. We are that's the royal we, even though it's largely just me, a small, queer, speculative, that means science fiction fantasy press here in Washington, DC, who mostly put out novellas and anthologies. The 4 folks here are part of the Neon Hemlock novella series of past, present, and future, which is kind of like a ghost thing too, kind of. I'm thinking the more I say it. And I'm really hyped to have the 4 of them here. So we have AZ Louise, what are we doing this? Brent Lambert, Caitlin Starling, and Bendy Barrett. We were also meant to have 2 other folks who could make it for various reasons. One of them was Ebony Dunbar, who wrote Stone and Steel, and Joan Tierney, who wrote The Killing Grounds. So you should also check out their work if you are able to. So I'm asking folks to go around and tell us a little bit about themselves and the order that they are reading, which we're going to totally remember without any mistakes. And AZ is going to go first.
Hi, I'm AZ. I'm a writer. I'm a poet. I'm an artist. And I'm really excited to share a little bit of my upcoming novella with you.
And I'm Brent.
Hi, I'm Brent. I am also a writer and editor. I would say one's more than the other, but it's kind of like half and half lately. So yeah.
And Caitlin.
First, though, do you guys want to say the titles of your works so people can go find them?
That would be smart. Yeah. For Neon Hemlock, I have a novella that is upcoming. We are finalizing pub dates here soon, so no specific date yet, but it's upcoming. It's called A Necessary Chaos.
And not just upcoming, like
soon.
So soon.
Yeah, soon. So yeah. Finally, soon. There's a story, but yeah.
And AZ, did you also want to mention?
Mine's called Off Time Jive, and it is also coming pretty soon.
Okay, good. So my name's Caitlin Starling. For Neon Hemlock, I wrote the novella Yellow Jessamine back in the first round of novella releases, and I've got an upcoming one. Dave, did we decide on the Oblivion Bride or the Oblivion Wife? Because I can't remember. I think it's the Oblivion Bride.
Bride. I frequently doubt myself as well. We were really
Yeah,
torn, y'all. Like they both sound really good.
we went through a lot of iterations on the title. I'm pretty sure it's the Oblivion Bride though, because we didn't pick the one that sounds like Sarah Gailey's The Echo Wife.
Right.
I also have several full-length novels out, including The Luminous Dead, The Death of Jane Lawrence, and the upcoming Last to Leave the Room. And I'm going to have a short story in the Crawling Moon Gothic Horror Anthology that's coming up soon.
So soon. Ben, it's you, yeah. Sorry.
Hi. Sorry about that. The button didn't want to click. I'm Bendy Barrett. I am a writer and a game maker. My book for Neon Hemlock was Empire of the Feast, published late last year. And you should pick it up because it's mad horny. Today I'm going to be reading a story called The Bone Meal Core from Luminescent Machinations, Queer Tales of a Monumental Invention, which is recently released through Neon Hemlock. So just Neon Hemlock all over the place, all day, every day. And I'm sure at the end we'll talk a little bit more about where you can find my stuff and stuff like that.
Yeah, we'll do that at the end. Sweet. I've also got Ben in The Crawling Moon as well. So Ben's all over the place. Sweet. Well, folks are gonna do a little reading for you from some different projects. I think we're going to kick it off with AZ, and I think that they're reading from their novella, right?
Yep, I'm just going to do a little bit from Off Time Jive.
Excellent.
It was hot enough in Harlem to sweat in seersucker. Hot enough to sweat nothing, probably. Using up about as much magic as I could muster, I ducked into the cool of Dee Dee's donuts, slipping sideways into a space that wasn't really there, invisible to the untrained eye. A dull pain blossomed next to my right eye by the time I made it to the other side. The sense of yeast, glaze, and fresh coffee hung in the magically chilled air, amidst a few soft conversations being held at the mismatched tables. The blue and white counter had been polished to a shine, and the menu was written on a chalkboard hanging behind Dee Dee's daughter, Pearl, who stood at the big old register. A little shy of her 15th birthday, Pearl leaned against the counter and gave off an air of not wanting to be there at all. "Afternoon, Miss Knox," Pearl said. "It's been a while since I saw you. Get you the usual?" "Yes, please." I rubbed my temple as I fingered the card in my pocket, left with my landlady in answer to my newspaper advertisement for an assistant. There was only one person sitting alone, a white man in a beige linen suit, wearing fussy little wire-rimmed glasses. I hadn't expected anybody to answer my ad, let alone an au fait, but he had to be the Calvin Bentley I was meeting. Pearl poured a cup of coffee and put a plain donut on a plate, sliding them across the counter. I passed her 50 cents. Bentley's eyes were on me the whole time, but when I turned to sit at his table, he was focused on the morning paper, trying to look casual, that we couldn't possibly look like anything except a nervous kid. "Miss Knox," he said primly, folding his paper. I wondered if I was late. "Afternoon, Mr. Bentley." I took my boater off, setting it on the table. I kept my hair shorter than his slick back auburn locks, too short to even bother with lie. "Let's get this out of the way before I ask you any questions. I ain't got a license to investigate. Had some trouble with the law a couple years ago." "What kind of trouble?" Bentley's hazel eyes narrowed behind his glasses. "Lab accident at the Bronx Academy of Magic. It's nothing. The Greens looked into it and nobody really cares because I'm good at what I do. Sometimes I get cases from a detective over at the station when he needs help. He just doesn't pay me as much as he might have, which usually only means I'm busy because I'm cheap. Copacetic?" "What kind of accident?" he asked. I ran my tongue over my teeth. He hadn't answered. "Old magic," I said. "Mostly." Bentley shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Not many people fool with old magic anymore. Nobody except whites, really. I sure don't. But I was tasked with reeling in a white colleague's work and couldn't. I don't do magical work with anybody involved in old magic anymore, if I can help it." "That's why I answered your ad, Miss Knox," he said. His eyes shifted. I quit my old magic doctorate program to study new magic, but Bronx Academy doesn't have anybody to teach it to me. Thought you were white, to be honest. Should have known he wasn't when his first thought wasn't the greens. Whites didn't have any worries about what kind of magic they were using, but greens would snatch up a white almost as quick as anyone else. They'd gotten the nickname back in the 1800s, when green dye had been deadly and had stuck till now. I could probably count the number of times I'd heard anyone call them the Department of Magical Law Enforcement on one hand. My mom is half and my dad's white, Bentley said. I can sense magic better than most, old and new. So I figured I could help. Maybe see some new magic firsthand instead of trying to figure it out on my own. Making magic's been a struggle for me lately, I said, not wanting to take him on under false pretenses. Hard to find the joy. Bentley studied my face. I couldn't blame a man for wanting to get out of the world of old magic. Old magic whites were even more hanky than the regular ones, more likely to turn on you when things went bad. And with old magic, things always seem to go bad. It's like that sometimes, Bentley said. Sometimes, I agreed. It felt more like all the time, now that my ability to sense magic had gotten less and less reliable. It had never been strong to begin with, but its deterioration was a real bring down. Bentley's blandly handsome face said as much by the way his lips twitched down just a little. I kept warning this kid that I was bad news, but he didn't want to listen. A doctorate, though. You must be good. I don't have the kind of money to pay you what you're worth. I don't pay me what I'm worth. I don't expect academy money. What can you do? 30%, considering that it's my contacts getting us work. 35 maybe, if you're good help. Solid? Solid. Good, we got work to do, I said. Come again? We got a job in about an hour, if you don't turn it down on principle. Doing what? You must have taken it before I even... If you can't sense anything. Bentley trailed off, uncomfortable. People didn't like talking about busted magic. Why would I turn it down? Got a call from an old friend, I said. Bentley scanned my face through his wire glasses. Seems one Dr. Helen Morrow is missing. Morrow, I know her. Me too, sad to say, I said. Bentley snorted. That old Faust is the most hated person on that campus. That made Bentley laugh out loud because it was the hard truth. Another prof told me he ain't seen her in about a week. She's white, why not call the cops? Beats me. We'll take it slow in case Clarence is laying an off-time drive. Come on.
Like we got the title reference in there. Yeah.
I can't be stopped.
It's fun hearing you read. It has like a little bit more of like a noir, like a hard-boiled vibe when I hear you read it. That I'm really into. And also it's making me think we need to do something for launch involving donuts.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, something to think about. Sweet, thank you. Brent's gonna go next. Brent, are you reading from the beginning too, or what are you reading from?
No, I'm going to read from Unnecessary Chaos, but I'm actually going to read from a point where I wanted something where there was agitation in the reading, in the dialogue, so I could, maybe let that come through. So I guess I should probably give people a little bit of an idea what the book's about. So So Unnecessary Chaos, if I had to pitch it really quick, it's like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but instead of a white suburban couple, it is two Black gay men, and one works for an imperial corporate empire, and the other one is works for a rebel group that's basically, they kind of style themselves as fight the power. So they have been kind of assigned to, spy on each other and pretend to be in this relationship. And somewhere along the way, they actually start falling for one another. So the scene I'm reading from is, we haven't quite got to that point, but there's definitely some agitation happening in the rebel's life. So that's the point of view I'm going to start from. So his name is Althus. So yeah, I'll kick it off. Cane towers were on the touristy side of Olarian, full of overpriced restaurants, expensive hotels, and dressed up hostels trying to pass themselves off as chic. Althus noticed a few street performers and grifters, but they would be removed before nightfall along with the rest of the local flair. The Festival of Tailbones was a thing to be experienced, and the Imperial Tourism Board had an expectation they'd be able to do it in one piece. Althus circled the block a few times, popping into a couple of different hotels for a quick drink to throw off any tails. When he was sure he wasn't followed, he went back to his room in the Magic Lounge and flopped on the bed of risky sturdiness. What was wrong with Vade? His shoes were scuffed, his pants wrinkled, and there was a cut on his neck Althus was sure he hadn't put there. Something had rattled him so much that he couldn't even keep his cover straight. Was he in danger? What could put a whisper in a situation where they came off that frantic? Part of Althus wondered if maybe Vade had seen the error of his ways and wanted to leave the compact behind. But as soon as that thought came, Althus smothered it. He had agreed to this task, and trying to find ways out of it did not help the Phantom Dragons. And what did Vade mean by friends? They were always alone when they saw each other. Sure, they both threw out a few random names to create the appearance of a larger life, but they never actually met anyone. For Vade to bring it up now could mean the man was trying to tell him something. He hopped up from his bed. Being alone wasn't going to do him any favors right now. He rented a motorbike and headed to a neighborhood across town full of cafes and little eateries with irreverent names meant to mock empires, like Rancid Provisions and Black Graves Brewery. The smells coming from each of them were a pleasant assault on his nostrils. He grabbed a batch of rice from a stall, Amos Mambo Combo, before making his way to the little blue building where Sajime worked most days. The red letters above the door were in the native language of Sajime's island home, Dayamai. Althus couldn't pronounce them properly, but they meant all wounds are welcome here. Sajime took care of her patients free of charge. Althus swallowed a mouthful as he entered and nodded at the medic at the desk, a fat man with intensely attractive lips. He wondered what battlefield this guy had walked away from. Sajime's employees practiced the kind of medicine most learn resisting the machinations of empire. Just here to see Sajime. The man wasn't immediately charmed by Althus. You must be what has her in such a shitty mood. She's in the back. Thanks. He gave the medic a quick nod and headed towards her office. Though the place had been once painted in the calming sky blue, it needed a touch-up. A few of the chem lights buzzed on and off. It reminded Althus of the therapy clinics back in Shedden, one-time simplicity dulled by years of disregard. But if he'd already annoyed Sajime, he wasn't going to start giving out any decorating tips. Sajime called out to him before he even got to her door. You're lucky I don't have any patients right now. I'd kick your ass out. Althus poked his head in and summoned a mischievous grin. Come on, you really can't hate me being here that much. It's the Festival of Tailbones. I hate everyone from out of town right now. All my favorite places are packed with you annoying assholes. She glanced at his food. Ricardo rice? Hey, I love that shit. I thought it was. Sajime held up a finger to cut him off. They changed the name to make more tourists buy it. Can't be too foreign for Imperials. I see where the front desk guy gets the pissiness from. He doesn't like anyone. Sajime flipped through a stack of medical records from behind her desk. Why are you here? Shouldn't you be getting ready? I don't really want to be alone right now. I need to clear my head. Our work isn't easy. She put the stack down and pulled out a bottle from a desk drawer. Don't have any glasses. Althus assessed the label. Rochadi vintage? Her luminous Natalis VI, leader of the Enoch Consortium, was painted on the bottle. She long ago mandated that her image be pictured on all her government's most prized exports. Her fruit serum tinted red eyes were meant to be a sign of superiority, and her bald brown head had been tattooed with white butterflies. Althus thought the black lipstick gave her a feral quality. Straight from the island where the Consortium ran things before selling our land to the Forbiddens. Cost me a damn lot. Would have been more, but I got a few cousins who work at the fort back home. Sajime handled the bottle to Althus. Got another one on the way, so don't be shy. The bottle was heavy as shit. A good swing could crack someone's head open. He did a couple of curls with it and got a laugh out of Sajime. Seeing her smile made him feel good. He unscrewed the bottle and took a long swig of the thick yellow liquid inside. It was sweet and hot going down his throat. I shouldn't feel like sick, Sajime, but I do. If you didn't feel bad, it would mean you're getting numb to all this. Sajime snatched the bottle back from Althus. She leaned back and took a swig. The Kim lights made her crystal monocle sparkle. Did I ever tell you where Carmola found me? A prison or something, right? Althus was fuzzy on the details, and the liquor wasn't helping. But he knew Sajime was in a bad way when she was brought into the Phantom Dragons. He wasn't keen on having to share details about his own past, so he never asked. A forbidden prison in the middle of the Red Ice Ocean, run by Paleskins as an organ farm. It was nothing for them to dip into someone's body and take out a liver or a bone. Fucking monsters. Sajime had a distant look in her eye. Carmola came in the dead of night on one damn boat. Can you believe that? But she tore the place apart, took out the guards, freed us all. So she took you in? Not right away. At first, she just agreed to drop me off somewhere and let me find my own way. But I think my anger resonated with her. I couldn't go home. That would just bring the courts down on my family. And she saw how much I wanted to tear it all down. She saved me too. You all did. And here he was, less sure of himself than ever. That anger would have gotten me killed without her. Althus took another swig of the Ochadi instead of answering. Maybe we can do something to hold off on the kill order, Sajime offered. See if there isn't another way to neutralize the threat he poses. Althus wasn't going to ask for that. My emotions don't matter here. I have work to do. Something rattled inside Sajime's desk. She drew her eyebrows together and pulled out a small white box. A new letter had been sent through. She hummed, her nails glistening until the tiniest of blue vines inched out of her fingertips, covering the entire box, then hardening and crumbling to ash. Althus suspected that anyone who touched the box before Sajime and unlocked it would have had something very unpleasant happen to him. Sajime unfolded the note and started to read. Her humming stopped and tears came to her eyes. Ashko and Taigen, they're dead. Cold dread wormed its way up Althus's spine. What? When? A few days ago. The forest is destroyed. How can that be? Sajime rubbed the bridge of her nose. One of the knives left behind points to the Coated Legion, but that doesn't make any sense. No, it didn't. Althus set down the bottle as understanding grew in him. This explained it. This explained all of it. The disheveled appearance, the scratch on his neck, the look of an animal ready to run away. Bade had done this. Althus was almost grateful. Now he had no more doubts. Bade had to die, and he had to be the one to do it. All right, stop there.
Thanks, Brent. It's wild just getting to hear all of the fictional places out loud for the first time.
Yeah.
That's how you say that.
Yeah. And some of them I was like, I had to practice and figure out for myself how do I actually want to say this.
Yeah.
But
We're like, what's the glottal stop in this or whatever?
Yeah.
Also, I just want you to know that every time you swear, you kind of like smile to yourself afterward.
A little bit. Because I'm always like, can I swear? I didn't think about it. I didn't even ask for this reading. So I was like, I hope I'm not just like breaking rules left and right as I'm going through this scene. But yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you. Very cool. Caitlin, you're up next.
Yeah, so I'm going to read the part of the opening scene from The Oblivion Bride. It'll become really clear basically what the whole premise of this book is about, but the quick version is it's a lesbian arranged marriage with big age difference. They're trying to stop a apparent death curse that is killing off our main character's family left and right and has left her the heir to a fortune that she does not want.
Do you want to tell them what the working title of the book was?
Wasn't it just Death Curse Arranged Marriage?
Yeah.
And this is actually also this scene in particular appeared in a similar form as a short story back at the beginning of COVID as a fundraising thing for something called the New Decameron. This has been edited since and will probably be edited again before it's actually out. So you get to see a work in progress. Lorelei Steddard, heir to the House of Farron, sits at the conference table where she will negotiate her marriage. In front of her is a leather folder filled with notes, assumptions, expectations. There are no photos, no dossiers. She should be afraid for her future, but it's hard to focus. Even her nerves can't pierce through the dull wrap of grief that has swaddled her tight for the past 6 months. She's been allowed to wear her mourning white, even while she's stuffed into a sharply tailored, pinched waist dress with a spangled brooch at her right hip. The dress, the shoes, the necklace that glitters at her throat all fit her and yet do not fit her. 6 months ago, she would never have worn anything so rich. 6 months ago, she would never have been sold off into marriage. Her uncle sits down next to her, either satisfied with his defensive prowling about the glass-walled room they wait in, or finally giving in to boredom. He, at least, looks natural inside a high government building, wearing his bespoke suit. He would have been here 6 months ago. But sitting where Lorelai is now would have been his eldest daughter, Gwyndifere, and she would have had some say in the match. Instead, Gwyndifere's bones were burned to ash 5 weeks ago. The white of her uncle's suit is blinding. The shadows beneath his eyes are all the darker for it. Chin up, he says. They will be here soon. They know how it would look to keep us waiting. We are not here to beg. The words make her skin crawl, and she has to bear down on herself with all her might to keep from standing up, from fleeing the room. She wants to be in her old apartment. She wants to be by her mother's memorial stone. She wants to be out past the city walls where the land shifts with every step, and give herself over to the wild magic beyond civilization. She does not want to be here, waiting to be bargained off in exchange for the possibility of rescue. Motion out in the hallway catches her eye, a coterie of bustling suits. Aides, lawyers, advisors, all flocking around the Prince of Valun. She rises to her feet just a few milliseconds after her uncle does, but she knows she will be rebuked for it later. She never learned all the proper forms of address, the tiny gradations of the highest echelons of polite society. Rifting take her, she was working in an office 6 months ago. She didn't even have a trust fund, let alone all this. All this because her family is dying, is dead. She watches the mob approach and fights to slow her breathing, tries to feel something beyond the stabbing grief and the wretched anger that is burning a hole in her heart. Even panic would be welcome, would seem appropriate. And then the crowd in the hallway parts, as if a spell has created a column of floor 2 feet wide where none was before. Not even the prince was given so much space. The backs of Lorelai's knees bump against her seat as she instinctively tries to retreat. Down the center of that column of floor walks a woman, nearly 6 feet in height, her dark hair shot through with gray, her eyes framed with elaborate metal piecing that stretches from her cheeks and brows to her temples and jaw. Beneath the woven metal strips, Lorelai can make out rippled, glowing scars pulsing a deep indigo. It's as if the limiter she wears is keeping her skull together, not just keeping her from blowing them all up. The woman walks with studied confidence, pinstripe suit moving with her, never pulling awkwardly. She wears a decorative cape held in place at her right shoulder with an elaborate pin that proclaims her rank. She doesn't need to wear it. Everybody knows that face. Everybody knows that cold, removed stare. Lorelai has seen her on the news 1,000 times. War alchemist Coruscant, she whispers. Her uncle sucks in a tight breath behind her. The prince's aide opens the door and the ruler of Valun steps in, followed by what looks like 2 lawyers and the war alchemist. The rest of the mob peels off and goes their separate directions, orders issued. Well, Lord Steddard, the prince says, extending a hand across the table. It is good to see you on a happy day this time around. Instead of at a funeral, he means. It is indeed, her uncle replies, bending down to kiss the prince's ring. His lips do not touch the stone, and his hand doesn't touch the prince's. Proper form or acknowledgement of potential contagion? He straightens. May I introduce Lorelai, my half-sister's daughter? 6 months ago, that half would have been important. It had meant she was the last in line for inheritance. Now it means nothing at all. Whatever is striking down her family, it doesn't care about parentage or marriages. It only cares about the blood. The numb spiral of her thoughts revolts in another sudden burst of pain, but Lorelai forces herself to keep moving, imitating her uncle's gesture. She does have your father's countenance, the prince says. He regards her, canting his head to one side. Lorelai avoids his gaze. Well, Miss Steddard, what is your mind about this marriage? Heart pounding in her ears, she says that I'm very lucky to have such a matchmaker. Her voice cracks. The rehearsed line amuses the prince, who laughs and pulls out his chair. He sits, and so do the lawyers and her uncle and Lorelai. Only the war alchemist remains standing. Lord Steddard smooths the front of his shirt, a nervous tick. And you, war alchemist? Will you be assisting in finding the match? Lorelai glances up at her, sees the older woman's mouth tense, but it is the prince who speaks. War alchemist Coruscant is here to be the match. Lorelai's shy glance transfigures into a terrified, disbelieving stare. Coruscant gazes back coolly. The prince continues. Miss Steddard, I am pleased to introduce you to your wife, Nephele. The woman inclines her head. Miss Steddard, she says. Lorelai can't speak, not even when her uncle taps her shoe with his below the table. We are honored, he says for her, though I have to admit to some curiosity. Some confusion. As heir to the House of Farron, Lorelai should be matched with a similar scion, or at least a wealthy business person. Excuse me. Getting over a cold, sorry about that. Nephele Coruscant is high-ranked and quite well off, but she brings no estate, no enduring status, no lineage, nothing but her own reputation to the match. A reputation as an ice-cold soldier, elegant in her brutality on the battlefield, brilliant in her innovations of martial spellwork. Lorelai can't look away from her, not even when Coruscant's jaw tightens in annoyance, not even when the other woman turns her gaze to the far wall, looking ahead blankly as she falls into parade rest. I understand, the prince says, that initial tests have shown no cohesive factor between all the deaths in your line. Is that correct? Her uncle fidgets in his seat. He hides it well by reaching for his glass of water, but Lorelai can feel her own pained response to the topic echoing back from him. That is correct, her uncle says. Most have been illnesses, and a few have been of the same type, but taken as a whole, there has been no consistency. The doctors are at a loss, her mother is dead, and even now has no diagnosis. Lorelai fists the fabric of her skirt between her fingers, weathering the storm of riotous emotion that rocks her. It's probably magical in origin, Coruscant says. Her voice cuts through the fog. I assure you, her uncle says, we're all properly warded. Then shall we blame divine judgment? Coruscant asks, voice level, no trace of cruelty in her mockery. Wards can only go so far, and even the best only defend against whatever they were built to defend against. I am here to investigate. Do we have to be married for that? Everybody turns to Lorelai then, but she barely notices. She is fixated on Coruscant. The anger leaps up in her gullet, then followed by desperation, and then, worst of all, hope. Hope the Coruscant can help. Strictly speaking, no, the prince says. However, the marriage would solve a host of other issues. What the war alchemist lacks in inherent title, nobody else would agree to it, would they?
So good. There's just something about a terrible arranged marriage. It just appeals. Thank you. Excited to get to put out a second book from Caitlin. It's gonna be awesome. All right, bringing up the rear. We got Ben.
Hello, all. Yeah, so my story is called The Bone Meal Core. It's a short story, so you don't need any background.
Are we gonna get the whole thing?
Yeah, you're gonna get the whole thing.
Excellent.
The anthology is essentially about Mecca. This is just, obviously one of the stories. I strongly encourage you to pick up the anthology because there are so many broadly varying takes on the theme. Okay, so the Bone Meal Core. All Finnegan talked about that spring was how desperately he wanted to get a blowjob on the hood of his Camaro. He'd restored it by hand over 4 summers, knew its ins and outs as keenly as the slick heft of his own meat. The decadent red lacquer running the length of its sleek body would have looked incredible under the sun-kissed skin of his bare ass and the perfect V of his hips and groin. Instead, Finnegan died at an undisclosed location during an operation that never officially happened. In lieu of details, our minds conjured images of his mal, blown to shit, wires protruding from his beautiful body, the dick he was so grotesquely proud of reduced to a black bar of still wet ink in the briefing photos passed around to the top brass. Some of us loved Finnegan, and some of us loathed him. He fucked like a champion, but he knew it, had the brash air of a strutting peacock in the brightest hues. He was casually cruel and an unrepentant cheat both in cards and in love. It undermined his memory to flatten him to a single thing. Remembering was a burden we can ill afford to set down. When the call came, they said it was a matter of honor. The papers cried that recruitment numbers were dismal. The youth, they said, were too high and too drunk to care. As if we weren't dancing in the ashes of yesterday's final war to end all wars and the one before. Nico spent the week before recruitment burning through lovers, a rotating draft of hot and eager flesh, each mouth more relentless than the last. They painted their ident bracelet with black nail polish and called it their golden ticket. The recruiter scoffed at their choice, but had to concede that a little polish wouldn't stop the bracelet from the necessary sync with the killing machine they'd been assigned. The bracelet was shackle and status. It spoke to the value of the individual wearing it. Natural malpilots are a relative rarity and vaunted for their sync capabilities with the machine. Behind their backs, the infantry calls them metal fuckers. The intelligence corps calls them the bone meal corps. Their first time in the cockpit, Nico was pierced by wires and reminded of the lovers who had slid into and out of their sweating skin, had ridden them like a beast of burden. It's impossible, Nico said later, panting and pale from exertion, to know if the machine is the dream or I am. Paul Cesar and Ida Marie Amelor initially developed the mechanized autonomous laborers to work in the coastal recovery zones. The hulking machines, hundreds of feet tall and capable of producing gigatons of force, were the first constructs that could survive the environmental hazards of the ruined, submerged cities. Both have said they didn't intend to turn the mouths into weapons. Both were offered sizable payments for their contribution to the future of warfare. We gauge the success of the war that followed in dollars or lives, not limbs left on far-flung fields or a night spent screaming into pillows, not in the loss of Cal's toothy smile or the dexterity in Masha's once nimble fingers, not in Kara's dead and distant stare or Sabine's widening cruel streak, not in Rabbit's now shaved head or Darren's teeth grinding stimulant dependency. Still, there were dormant mouths rusting outside of what were once the coastal cities, hundreds of silent giants among the concrete spines jutting from beneath the waves, inert metal standing sentry to dead cities. It's rumored that Amelor, a black-clad ghost, makes pilgrimage there to stand vigil with her accidental weapons amidst the high and rising waters. Finnegan had always had misgivings about the work. He had already cut his long bleach blonde hair and crafted a more upright posture through basic training. If he kept gay porn magazines under his mattress and screwed a square-jawed intelligence officer in the showers a few times a week, that could be forgiven considering his sacrifice, his transformation, and apotheosis into an asset. But his misgivings he had to obliterate. Our dead friend had communicated his hesitations about the mission through oblique methods. The specifics of what he hid was less important than how he hid them. Finnegan taught us how to go unseen, to trade information in a shadow network of carnal knowledge too diffuse to destroy. He'd squirreled his secrets away in the furthest reaches of the machine, in muscle memory that only those of us who knew him could access. After he was gone, one of us slipped into his mouth, let wires pierce our skins, recalled the summers when he was alive, and found miraculously that we could recover what was left of him. Gigabytes of data, digital flotsam, fragments of information floating in the bioelectrical pathways of his war machine. To access this trove, we had to mirror the private poses he was so fond of. Head thrown back with abandon, mouths wide open in ecstasy, backs arched like an icon of pure wanting, allowing ourselves to fill up with the questions that he was too afraid to ask aloud. The answers to those questions told quite a story. And it's funny, isn't it, that the powers that be thought so little of our sensuality that they missed the back doors built into the curves of our spines and the proud outward jut of our chins. We formed a network of lovers, an army of paramours living and dead that spoke to each other across the gulf of distance, time, and gesture. We began with the simple mandate to remember those of us who had been dissolved by the war engine, those who had fought and died, whose legacies had become spreadsheet cells. We evolved as the memory of those we loved and lost filled us up. We learned so much from their secrets, battle strategies, code words, depraved sexual fantasies, and favorite recipes for bao. We took everything that our lovers were inside ourselves. The space we'd given over to the inertia of our usurped lives was pushed out, reformed, and folded 100,000 times until it made a killing edge. The war continued. Our hesitations evaporated. It wasn't long until we scoured the waterlogged cities for the regretful half of the malcreation team. Ida Marie Amelor, the wraith standing at the water's edge, we asked her a simple question. Are the abandoned machines still alive? Can they be turned into the stones we throw at giants? The answer she gave, eyes hardened by regrets, salt wind whipping her brown hair, was enough to spark something new. We slipped out at night. We left our post. We were shot dead and jailed for treason. We took down watchtowers. We whispered insurrection. We panted pipe bombs under command centers. We fled into the woods. We were chased by dogs we trained ourselves. We were caught in fields by floodlight in the piercing cold. We had our ident bracelets ripped from our wrist, implanted with explosives, turned into trackers. We were found guilty after sped up trials on shoddy evidence. We stole mouths that had belonged to our dead partners. We betrayed the very flag that they lay over the caskets of our friends, lovers, and companions. We did it again and again. Those of us who survived found each other in the fallen cities. We slogged through freezing waters and, sick with vertigo, clambered up stories of salt-stained metal to investigate the abandoned mouths and assess their viability in winning us our freedom. They were not the sleek, fast-moving death dealers we were accustomed to. Our ranks have been thinned by the difficulties of getting here, but the piecemeal memories of those we've lost But the piecemeal memories of those we've lost live inside us, and there was no path back to who we were when our eyes were still closed. Rebellion has become a burden we can ill afford to set down. Irrespective of cost, we begin. From the bones of our lovers, we begin.
It is frankly upsetting how good you are at writing things that are horny, sad, and profound. Thank you. Really cool hearing that out loud. And I kind of want to hold up the illustration to the camera in case anybody wants to see it. It's the fun, I don't know if you'll really be able to tell. It's like of the upsetting dossier of Finnegan killed at the very, very beginning. Yeah, so that's in Luminescent Machinations, and that came out July 25th. So it's only recently out in the world. Thank you. Cool. So let's switch gears a little bit. We have, it looks like around 15 minutes. So I think I've got maybe 2 questions we can do, and then we'll do a little outro. So the first one is, I'm curious if any of y'all feel like there are any books or stories that you, your work, either the one you read from or something else that you've just been thinking about a lot, is in conversation with or is trying to be in conversation with, or that I think it also kind of, the other slash here is like, or that like sort of inspired where you went with the story. We could go in this one, maybe though, if someone has something right off the bat, or we can go in the order we read, whatever folks want. Caitlin's got something.
I got 2. So the first is a very quick inspiration piece for Lorelai's character, which is that way back when I started writing with the actual goal of being published, I was really heavy into the video game Dishonored. And there is a character in there named Callista, who is a side character. She's just sort of the governess nanny character for the plot relevant child. But in the game, there's a thing called the heart, and you can hold it up to various people and it will tell you secrets about them. And one of the things it talks with her is that all of her family is dead except for her and her uncle. And it never explains why. And so I've had all these theories, and I really like playing with the idea of someone whose family just can't stop dying all of a sudden. And actually, I once wrote a fan fiction where Callista was in an arranged marriage because they needed someone they needed her to secure an heir because she was the last person who could inherit. And it has nothing in common plot wise with what the Oblivion Bride ended up being, but definitely is where originally that character came from. Cool. In terms of works, and my work is definitely in conversation with, I just read the book The White Road by Sarah Lotz, it came out over a decade ago, I think, and is about a guy who basically works for a website that is very similar to the old internet standby Rotten.com. And he goes viral after he almost dies in a cave, getting footage of some other dead bodies in a cave, which if you've read my book, The Luminous Dead, you're like, okay, cool, dead bodies in a cave. He then goes on to Everest to go film the dead bodies there. And but it gets really weird, and there's an interwoven timeline with a woman climbing Everest who thinks that she's being followed by an unseen force. And somehow, despite me having not read this book before I wrote The Luminous Dead, they are both dealing with the same issues of like death voyeurism and grief and isolation and psychological drama in extremis. So definitely, if you liked The Luminous Dead, pick up The White Road. And if you've read The White Road and you're like, oh, I wish this was gayer, you can pick up The Luminous Dead.
That's funny. You mentioning the parallel story and being chased. Someone just recommended that book to me a few weeks ago, and it just unlocked. So now there's 2 reasons to read that book. Very cool. Anybody else have an answer? Izzy?
Okay, so this book is a spy book. I'm not going to mention the book that I was made spiteful by. But I just really wanted to write a story set in the Harlem Renaissance that had like Black people in it. And so once the spite wore off, what I actually found myself in conversation with was the language of the past. Sorry, I'm having asthma. And the way that as I was learning about jive, I realized that this is all language like my dad and my brother and I all use together still to this day. So it was partly that, but also, y'all watch Star Trek: The Next Generation? I really wanted it to be noir in the way that those holodeck episodes are noir. I wanted it to be noir in a slightly campy way.
Yeah.
So it is both in conversation with the way people talked in the early 1900s, but also kind of Star Trek.
I love that for an entirely un-science fictional book. That is absolutely.
I love the level of camp. I love that all of the outfits in those episodes look like they were made with the fabric from the upholstery section of Joann's. Like, I don't know, that level of slight goofiness just really speaks to me.
That's beautiful. And I'm recasting some of the outfits in my head now. To get a couple of pages done, like as like a comic or a graphic novel, just to get that visual. Sorry, I cut one of you off. Sorry.
It was me, and I'll be super quick. The one of these is a kind of a plug for Brent's book, because we talked about this a lot when we were like just kind of cementing, kind of like when I was cementing final versions of my book and Brent was going through revisions for his book. Our books are very much both. My book, Empire of the Feast, also out through Neon Hemlock, and his book, Unnecessary Chaos, which will be published this year, both have a lot to say about Empire, but are very kind of situated at almost like the opposite end of the spectrum. Like one is kind of like, this is the outcome of all of the machinations, and the other is like, this is what happens to the people at the top of this machine when they're just kind of inherit this shit show after cycles and cycles and cycles of this kind of like predatory behavior. So it was really cool being able to have both of those stories kind of coming online at the same time. And we kind of generated them without any kind of conversation. So the fact that we were working with the same publisher and kind of in the same cohort working on these was really super like lucky and auspicious. And as for my story, The Bone Meal Core, this is a kind of like a post hoc thing, but I started watching the Gundam show, The Witch from Mercury, which is this kind of like super gay for Gundam. Like I was just like so surprised that they just like went with this kind of like lesbian like like weird like political / emotional relationship, and it really made me, and the kind of the focus of the Gundam series on like these machines of war, and kind of making them kind of like these like cool, like this could be a toy, but then like in the next episode it like murders like a whole colony of like 100,000 people, and you're just like I that like tension I think really influences, I think, a lot of the stories in Luminescent Machinations, and certainly influenced mine. And so I think that is also a touchstone, how kind of like easy it is to make these stories, or kind of like frame these death dealing machines as kind of like just kind of like cute parts of our kind of cultural imagination.
Yeah. Like we had these miniatures made of the like beast from the front of the cover, and it's like, yeah, it's like a Happy Meal toy, right? Like totally appropriate. Like everyone should get one of these with their nuggies. Except no, right? Yeah. Brent, what about you?
Okay, so to piggyback off Bendy, I definitely do think that Necessary Chaos has a lot in going on in conversation with Empire of the Feast. Also, by the way, love that novella so much. So if you, yeah, buy it. Anyway, so I think our two works both also, on top of what Bendy said, also have a lot to say about like how Empire polices people's feelings and them not being able to express their truest selves, even when they want to, and they have these, these moments where they just want to be like, I want to just do this, but they can't because of everything that comes along with existing in their world. So yeah, that's one book for sure. I think this is in conversation with. Another that I want to say it's in conversation with, I'm like, this book is way too good. Like, I don't even want to say it. Is Sorcerer of the Wild Eeps from Kyle Shante Wilson. And when I first set out to kind of do Necessary Chaos, that was one of the books in the back of my head, because I had never read anything that was like secondary world, and also at the same time unmistakably Black in everything that it was doing. And whether I succeeded or not, that's something I got to think on later, but it was something I was definitely like thinking about as I was constructing this. And also too, I think in terms of like world building conversations, I think about Jade City and the craft sequence. I just like, I want so many more like secondary worlds that aren't a pre-industrial, very badly done middle age pastiche thing. And I was like, yeah, give me magic, but also give me cars and give me trains and give me, motorcycles and all that. So, I definitely want to see more Final Fantasy 7s and 8 transposed into novels and stuff, So that was all in the mix when I was thinking of this.
Very cool. That describes Caitlin's new novella as well.
Yeah.
See, okay, well, I'm sold.
Yeah,
magic phones and rail cars.
Yeah, the rail cars in particular are like,
that's just shamelessly cribbed from Dishonored. I'll admit that up front.
Inspired,
but there should be more.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, 254. I think we're kind of closing out. I guess the thing is, maybe I'm gonna cheat and do like a little combo question. Tell everyone where they can find you on the internet. Okay. So of the work that you've been talking about, if off the top of your head, some of the tropes that that it plays with, or like references, maybe like just let people know. Like, we already know, sorry, Caitlin, arranged marriage is in that book. But so I don't know, just sometimes people are intrigued by particular tropes, and if you've got them, just let them know if they're there. And if you are not a tropey person, then maybe like a little log line thing, if you feel like there's something that they maybe wouldn't have picked up from your reading. And then tell folks where they can find you on the internet, which could be, it used to be Twitter, y'all. Twitter, who even knows what that name is? And like, please tell everyone your website, because that is probably stable. Oh, and the Neon Hemlock is neonhemlock.com. We sell books. Also, ask your bookstores and libraries to stock them, please. AZ, you can go first.
All right, so I guess my trope is, like unrequited love, but it also is like semi-hard-boiled detective, but also gay. But you can find me at azlouise.com. I'm really not on Twitter anymore, so I'm azlouise on Blue Sky, and I'm azlouise writes on Instagram.
Brent.
Sorry, I had too many screens and was trying to get the mouse on the right one. All right. My trope is, I think it's pretty obvious. It is definitely enemies to lovers. And you know what's funny? That's not normally the trope I go for. I actually like the opposite. I like lovers to enemies, but this is what happens. So yeah. You can find me on Blue Sky, Brent C. Lambert. We won't mention the previously known as Twitter site. I'm on Instagram, same name, Brent C. Lambert. You can find me there. I also have a website, brentclambert.com. So I try to keep it consistent. That's usually where you can find me.
Although we didn't put a C in your name in the cover.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. No, it looks better without the C. It looks better. I've seen the cover. It looks way better without the C.
Yeah.
We'll keep it off.
My turn now. So yeah, obviously arranged marriage and a age gap, arranged marriage. But also in there we've got the traumatized soldier learning to maybe prioritize herself once in a while, but dealing with a lot of the trauma of her career. And we've got, I had another one, but I don't really remember, can't remember off the top of my head, but there's definitely catching feelings. There's definitely a whole lot of grief. And fashion. Yeah, if you're going to inherit a bunch of money all of a sudden, the least you can do is get a couple cool outfits out of it. So there's definitely some fashion. However, unlike the rest of my books, I don't think there are really any terrible women. I feel like everyone's kind of nice in this one. It's very weird. Usually I write horror and at least one of the main characters is completely unlikable. I guess maybe the War Alchemist gets close sometimes.
Yeah,
but this is a softer.
I don't love the uncle.
Well, he's not a main character and he's not one of my main women in it.
Right,
so
right.
he can just be annoying over in the corner. You can find me. My website is caitlinstarling.com. Unlike Brent, I don't keep everything consistent. So apologies. Instagram is author C Starling and Blue Sky is just C Starling.
Yeah, you really just went with whatever you felt like.
Yeah.
Okay.
It started by doing my Twitter handle as a pun, and then it got put in print, and so I could never change it, but I didn't want to use the pun everywhere else. Yeah. It's just a mess.
Yeah, no, I feel you. Ben.
Again, I'm Bendy Barrett. You can find me at benmakesstuff.com. Brent was kind enough to send me a Blue Sky invite, but I haven't done it yet. I love you so much, Brent. Thank you so much. I also write as Benji Bright, but you can find all of my stuff at benmakesstuff.com. Tropes. Empire of the Feast has an amnesiac protagonist, which is actually a trope that I despise.
But you wrote it for me.
Yeah, of course. Not only did I write it, I had a blast writing it. It has enemies to lovers with an asterisk, and then underneath somewhere it's still kind of enemies though. And oh shit. Yeah, and I think in terms of setting, it's this kind of weird sci-fi but magic. kind of setting that like just hand waves a lot of the hard science of space travel. So yeah, I think those are my tropes. Did I miss anything?
No, I have a hard time with the genre of that one. If people aren't into like science fantasy, like kind of gets it, but it's
Yeah.
also kind of horror. So it's
I have a
it's little-
description.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I do. It is like if the Chaos Marines of Warhammer 40K were the focus of a story and they were all elegant and horny. And that's
Oh.
pretty much like what I would describe it as.
There's a particular audience for that summary, but I really like it.
Yeah. That's my pitch to it. Whenever I tell people, I'm like,
fuck.
if you don't know the Chaos Marines, just go look it up, and it will all make sense.
Love it.
Elegant and horny.
Well, thanks y'all
Brings
for
a tear
joining
to the
us.
eye.
These are the cream of the crop of this Neon Hemlock crew. Really delighted to have them here with me. And what else? neonhemlock.com, find the books, and request them for your libraries and your bookstores, please. You want to be more connected with your local libraries. Thanks to Outright.